Hi everyone, welcome into our very special playoff prediction episode of Sun Times Game Week. Again, we're here at the Sun Times studio. We want to give a shout out to our content partner, ABC7, for sharing this on their Facebook Live right now. We've got a very exciting show. We're going to quickly go through some news right now, talk about our Super 25, but again, it's playoff football time, so we've got a lot to discuss. Let's get into the news really quick.
News, not a huge week of news. But I guess the big news, and a lot of people wouldn't say it's big because we don't talk about every commitment on this show, but Leo's Fred Cleveland committed to North Carolina A&T. I know everybody's very excited about that. But it's interesting because North Carolina A&T is a Division I program. Mm-hmm. And Fred Cleveland is one of those kids that nobody thought was big enough, was tall enough to ever play D1 basketball, and he is. He's excellent. He could be our player of the year. He's that good. He's a fantastic, fantastic player. He's one of those kids like, a Tyler Eulis or a Jerome Randall that's way under recruited, and we're going to be talking about him all winter long. He's a great player. He's probably going to take North Carolina A&T to the tournament while good old Illinois sits out on the sidelines again, and they'll be wondering what happens.
Michael's predicted it first.
It's important that Fred Cleveland went D1, and it's a huge accomplishment for him. The other big basketball news was the G League. For those who are familiar with NBA stuff, they know what the G League is. It's going to start offering $125,000 contracts to high school players right after high school. No more college. The issue with this, though, is how they're going to select them, how many they're going to be. They said the elite players. So this could wind up being whoever the McDonald's committee picks.
Right.
We don't know how this is going to work. It could be only players who USA Basketball have invited in the camps over the last 4 years. So it'll be interesting to see how that all fleshes out. And if there is, I'm just kind of guessing here, there'd be a mid-level where maybe there's a $70,000 contract in a couple of years for the other kids, because that's when the floodgates open, when all of a sudden people are going to start choosing that over going to Illinois State or somewhere. So it's an interesting kind of first step to watch that, and it will have a big impact locally, I'm sure.
It's definitely going to be an interesting thing to watch how it affects it at the college level and locally, how our kids do with this new offer.
Our other news, football-wise, I wanted to mention, because we've talked about him so much, Ty Gavin, Notre Dame's Mr. Everything, Player of the Year candidate. He was hurt in Week 8. He did not play at all in Week 9 against Joliet Catholic. That was a must-win for Joliet Catholic, and they won. But Ty Gavin didn't play for Notre Dame. We are closely watching and trying to figure out when he will be back, and we'll let you know on Twitter as soon as we find that out. And the last piece of news, Annie wanted to update us on
Tom Welch. Yeah, we're getting into basketball season shortly here, and a kid to watch obviously is going to be Tom Welch, dual sport athlete, does incredible things on the soccer field. He just completed his 18th shutout. Naperville North beat Neuqua Valley 3-0 and advanced to the sectional semis where they'll play Batavia in Geneva. So just an interesting storyline to watch. Naperville North is going for their third straight state championship. So that program, is a powerhouse. And if you're a soccer fan, that's definitely a team you want to watch.
You can read all about that. Annie did a story and a video on the site. Check out Tom Welch. Luckily, soccer ends before basketball starts, unlike football, so there will be no...
It was funny, though, because Tom talked about, soccer being his buffer, just to take his mind off basketball for 3 months out of the year. But he's so good. He's so good.
I think that's very mentally healthy.
Yeah,
because these other kids, I don't know how they do it.
I mean, when it comes to
crazy.
AAU and basketball and playing all year round, it's very easy to get burnt out. And when you're at the high school level, I think a lot of athletes nowadays are forgetting that you can play two sports. Give yourself that luxury of playing two sports, and that's something that he's always taken advantage of. And it's not something he wanted to let go of in his high school career.
It's also a huge difference of opinion among college coaches, whether they like seeing an athlete play more than one sport or if they'd prefer an athlete to play just one sport. As someone who played several college sports, ran track and swam, I had so many coaches asking me about my other sports that I played, even though it wasn't they were recruiting me for it. It seemed to be a very positive thing. I think that's kind of shifted as the years have gone on, and now college coaches are very divided on that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see kids still doing it at a high level.
It's just blows my mind how good he is on the soccer field. His coach talked about him being able to go, anywhere he wanted, Division I, to play soccer, and he just chose basketball. So
what a problem to have.
Definitely an interesting, it'll be fun to watch him this basketball season as well. Let's get into football. got a lot to talk about, like we mentioned. Quickly, let's talk about the Super 25. We've got one new team in, but since this was the last week of the regular season of the Super 25, why don't you discuss with us what the main storyline of the Super 25 was this year?
I mean, the main storyline is 12 teams, and it got through 9-0, which is blows my mind a lot. And it's also mixed when people kind of talk to me about that. They're like, obviously the scheduling system is broken. That's one side. And the other side is like, man, there might be some really good teams this year. So I'm excited to see what piece of the spectrum is actually the case, why we have 12 9-0 teams in the rankings. And there's still a few 9-0 teams that are not even in the rankings, just based on strength of schedule, a few unknown things, so we could see that shake up in the next few weeks. So just the success of that.
Who was the new team in, and what got them in this last week?
The new team in is Warren, and to be honest with you, I'm kind of looking at them as in comparison to the 9-0 teams. They lost to Barrington in week 1. Barrington knocked off Maine South. Barrington was playing very good football to start the season and kind of leveled off as the season continued. Warren has won 8 straight games after starting the season with a loss. And I think that they have just as much momentum as any other 9-0 team out there. So I'm curious to see what they do in the playoffs.
Definitely will be interesting to see. There's a lot of playoff discussion we've got to get through, like we mentioned. If you have any questions, please send them our way. Let's get right to it. First up, we've got 1A.
Class 1A, I did my research because I didn't see any 1A football this year. I think I did last year, but basically the way we're going to break down these classes, we're going to try and stick to a format. We're going to talk about the favorite, then our pick to win, then kind of a dark horse underdog, then the best first round game, the possible first round upset, and then a fact, an actual fact after all of that opinion stuff at the end. So for 1A, the clear favorite, according to kind of the experts we saw on Comcast and everybody's picking Lena Winslow. They're 8-1. They are the number 4 seed. And there's some discussion about who they're going to be up against. Maybe Camp Point Central, maybe Arcola. But I think Lena Winslow is the clear pick for everybody. The dark horse is interesting because they're from our area. Aurora Christian, they're a small school, they play a fun style, and it's going to be interesting to see what they can do in this bracket. They do get a number 1 seed in the second round, Princeville, so it might not be the best road for them. The best first round game, Leroy at Orr. Orr is in the playoffs again, second year in a row. Leroy is going to have to come all the way up here and play at Orr. Orr has their own field on the west side, and that's a really weird, really interesting game. Orr is 8-1, not the best schedule, but we know James Madison is a great athlete. I covered him last year, so I'm kind of excited to see if Orr can get their first ever playoff win against Leroy. The possible first round upset is one of those kind of, we're going to see these a lot, where the seeds got things a little mixed up. I have a number 9 Aurora Christian, probably over number 8 Anawan would be the upset. And the nugget, the fact, 3 teams in the 32-team field have never won a playoff game, ever in school history. Edwards County, they're 0-6. Or, we mentioned, is 0-3, and Madison is 0-2. So we can watch and see if any of them get their
Someone's
first
gonna
win.
do it.
Someone is going to do it this year, those 3 teams.
Class 2A. Gibson City is all anybody talks about in this class. Maroa Forsyth is the other team that has some experience, and Decatur St. Teresa is another one to look at. But Gibson City, perennial power, they are our pick. They're everybody's pick. They're the favorite. Mentioned Decatur St. Teresa. They're the one to watch. They'd be the dark horse. And the first round game to watch, the best one, Knoxville is a number 9. They're coming to the west side to play Hope Academy, number 8. And that's interesting for a lot of reasons. Hope Academy, I watched them against Mount Carmel. They gave Mount Carmel a good game for like 3 quarters. I mean, that's a 2A team.
Right.
So Hope Academy, I think, has a real chance in this bracket. I think a better chance than a lot of people gave them credit for. And the fact that Knoxville has to come play at Hope Academy is culturally interesting because the teams from the suburbs last year wouldn't go play at Hope Academy. That's where the shooting was. Providence played, and then we had several Catholic League teams not want to play at Hope Academy. Knoxville apparently is going to go up there and play, so we'll see if that turns out, but it's one to watch. Our upset, Jacksonville Rout over Warrensburg Latham. I only picked that because I know someone who went to Jacksonville Rout.
His delivery on that was so
confident.
Yes.
No, Chris Bongino used to run the prep desk here at the Sun-Times, a big Jacksonville Rout guy, so we're going with them as Sun-Times unity. And the actual fact from Class 2A, Gibson City has averaged 49 points a game while only allowing 27. So that's
it's
how
easy to see why
dominant they've been.
Yeah, it's easy to
Is
see
no
why
one
we
talking
think-
about Tuscola?
Yeah, I did see Dave Bernhard picked them, but everyone else is picking Gibson City.
Interesting. I'd watch out for Tuscola.
Beth likes Tuscola. All right.
That's take. That's Beth's hot take.
Another one of the smaller classes. We'll hit quickly here. Class 3A. Byron is the favorite. They're 9-0. They are actually in our coverage area. We do cover Byron. We haven't talked much about them this year. I think kind of the dark horse and my pick is going to be Carlinville. They got a little bit of talk on the Comcast show, and their numbers are amazing. They average 51 points a game and only allow 8. So that's just that. Looking through all of the 256 teams and the spread, that's one of the most impressive we've seen. So we'll go with them. The best first round match. Kind of interesting when I saw this on the brackets. Dwight at Lisle.
Oh, right.
Because Paul Barber was talking so much about wanting to coach somewhere like Dwight, and that's who they wind up playing.
Right,
in
that's
the first
super
round.
interesting
Yeah.
because he
So that was
always talked
strange.
about that small town atmosphere, and then he ends up at Lisle, which Lisle is smaller, but
Yeah.
not
Not like
Dwight.
Not that.
Not Dwight.
Dwight has to go to Lisle, and Dwight's a 13, so Lisle would be the favorite there. The upset in that one, going to have to kind of go against the public league a little bit, but Clark is a 7 seed. Clark on the west side, and I covered them this year. They're a fun team, they're a good team, but I'm not sure they're ready for some prime 3A playoff football, and they have to play Spring Valley Hall. So I'm guessing that might be a tough one for Clark, so that's the upset pick. And the fact on this one, Urban Prep Englewood, another team we've covered, another public league team, is quite the anomaly out of the whole 256 team field because they're actually allowing more points than they're scoring this season, and they managed to make the playoffs.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, they're allowing 17 and scoring 16, so.
Seems
How
difficult.
did this happen?
But they got into the playoffs, so good for them.
All right, up next, 4A. I think, let's talk about IC Catholic Prep.
Yeah, they are. I mean,
I mean, we can't.
I kind of joked about that. I'd like to see them play Lincoln Way East. I mean, I've never seen them lose in the last 4 years. I see them at state, they just dominate.
It's
Yeah.
insane. Like, how has no team in Class 3A the past seasons, and now 4A, they move up, and they're still dominating the same way?
Yeah, they've got a great system. They had great athletes, too, over
Yeah.
the last couple of years. And the big thing in this class is Rochester. They are the big dog in 4A. They've owned 4A. You know, can IC Catholic beat them? That was pretty much the main talking point for this one. Beth, what were your IC Catholic Rochester thoughts?
I would love to see that game. This year's IC Catholic team reminds me a bit of Phillips when they were playing in 4A, and it was one of those things where they really hadn't been tested all year. Was that 2 years ago, potentially? They hadn't been tested all year. They were blowing people out of the water just like IC Catholic has done this year, and they met Rochester, and Rochester just was such solid, predictable football. They couldn't beat them. It was like they knew exactly who they were keying in on. They know their assignments. They knew exactly the blocks they should be doing. And sometimes a team that isn't used to being down or even having like any points scored on them, which is kind of where IC Catholic is, gets really flustered when they get in that space. I think that's what we saw from Nazareth when they played Marist a couple weeks ago.
Right.
So we'll see. I mean, I think that would be, I would love to watch that game, IC Catholic and Rochester, and I think it could go one of two ways. We see another blowout, another 49-0 win by IC Catholic, or we see a really, really close game.
It's hard because when you talk about IC Catholic, you talk about these instances where potentially it could be a good game, potentially this team.
They haven't
or
been
that team,
tested.
right?
I don't
could
know.
give them a good game, and then it's just a blowout.
They've literally blown everybody out.
That's why it's funny to think about.
McNamara, that's the team that's interesting. McNamara lost in the last play of the game to IC Catholic, and nobody's really talking about them. They're on the other side of the bracket with Rochester. So Rochester's going to have to get by a Bishop McNamara team that's down in Kankakee, who almost was able to beat IC Catholic. So I think they're the clear dark horse pick in
Bishop
this one to
McNamara?
watch. Yeah, they've got an excellent
if Rochester
chance.
goes all the way to the state championship game, there's a real solid chance they win. But the years that someone knocks them out and they don't have to play that other 1 seed is when
Yeah.
we've seen, a new champion in 3 or 4 or whatever it is that year. So
Is
we'll
there
see.
anyone though on IC's side that could potentially knock them out before the state championship?
Coal City's having just a great year. They just demolished Paul Parfit's Lisle team in week 9, so I think they're worth watching.
Richmond Burton's decent most years, and they kind of stay in their area, so we really don't know what they look like, nor have they seen many Chicago area teams.
Yeah, IC Catholic's road looks pretty good. The best first round matchup, I just kind of blindly picked Heron at Pontiac for all of our friends in Pontiac. They love football. They're finally back. So that's like a storied Illinois program, much like Joliet Catholic is now back on the upswing. So that should be a lot of fun there. And the upset, I have Johnsburg, a number 10 seed over Ag Science, the number 7 seed. Sorry, Ag Science, but I saw Johnsburg beat Phillips a couple of years ago.
Johnsburg's good.
Yeah, so that might be a tough one for Ag Science, although it'll be in Chicago. They're going to be the late game at Gately, it looks like.
I'm pretty sure that's where they beat Phillips too.
Yeah.
In Chicago.
No, it was in Johnsburg. I will never forget it because I froze to death and was snowed on in Johnsburg.
And the next year when they played again was the opposite result then.
It was quite the, there were a lot of pickup trucks and country music at halftime. And
sounds about right.
Johnsburg, you scarred Michael.
It was, Phillips and I were both a little rattled by our night in Johnsburg.
By the environment in Johnsburg.
Let's put it that way.
Us city folk are used to the pickup trucks and the country music.
Well, no, they like had a parade of them before the game around the field. It was strange.
Pickup trucks are common trend in towns like that.
On the field?
I guess that's
Yeah, it was strange.
Why not?
But the fact for 4A for you, Rochester, who we talked about, they've won 7 state titles. So I mean, there's a reason why so many people pick Rochester. So we'll see if the Rochester IC Catholic thing happens.
Next classification to break down is a classification where, we have a lot of teams involved, 5A. What do you got for us, Michael?
This was the most boring of
boring?
all the classes. Even like the teams we knew less about in the other ones, there was something interesting. But man, 5A just looks like this Montini-Hillcrest collision course. I mean, I haven't seen anybody else pick any other state title game. And I mean, we've seen Montini, we saw them beat Loyola. I have not seen Hillcrest yet. It's interesting. This was, to me, the toughest one to pick, probably because I haven't seen Hillcrest. But I'm going to go with them. I'm going to go with Hillcrest. Their numbers this year have been phenomenal. They haven't been challenged, though, so that could be an issue.
I'm going to go with Montini. I mean, I haven't seen Hillcrest, so like you said, I don't have much to weigh in on Hillcrest, but Montini's road to the state championship game is just, it looks like a cakewalk. I mean, Peyton's the number 1 seed. They went undefeated, but the thing you got to talk about when talking about them being the number 1 seed is the fact that they haven't been tested at all. And when you look at a team like Montini, who's a 4 seed, they get tested all season long. So my pick is definitely Montini.
I'd pick Montini. A little fact about Hillcrest, though, they've been averaging 42 points a game on offense and allowing 12, so that's a pretty nice combination of those two. Montini, though, when we talk about strength of schedule, that is what Montini has to their credit. Yeah. They're a 5A team that was 1 game away from winning the CCL Blue, which is arguably the best conference in the state most years. So I have to go with Montini. I think they have the athletes to really dominate 5A this year.
Game to watch?
I had Back of the Yards at Elmwood Park. I want to see if Back of the Yards can get their first playoff win ever. It seems like that, Elmwood Park, it's a winnable, maybe one. It's going to be just a great yardstick, measuring stick for them to see how far the program has come. I think the upset I've got here is Joliet Catholic over Metamora. Joliet Catholic's just a 14 seed, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were the 3rd or 4th best team in this entire class, the way it shakes out. And I think we were talking about the roads. Hillcrest might wind up with a very, very far away quarterfinal. They wound up on the south side of this bracket. The brackets are broken down north and south, and so that could mean them having to travel to Carbondale. I mean, that's very far.
Right.
I mean, maybe a Champaign, maybe somewhere. Whereas Montini is going to be able to play in our local area the whole way through, so that's got to be a big help. I mean, I'm still going to pick Hillcrest, but you got to worry about having to play a game down there.
Some interesting.
The fact: Joliet Catholic has won 13 state titles. The other 31 teams in the entire field all together have only won 13. So that's how much more dominant.
If I'm looking at this from Hillcrest perspective, that's the game that I'm going to circle, is if I get to match up against Joliet Catholic, because that team has every piece to be good. There's a reason why they were ranked in the Super 25 to start the year. I know they lost one of their running backs due to injury, but they've owned their style of play for years. They're back on their style of play. They're on the upswing. This is like a team that reminds me a bit of Naperville Central, in 2015, where they lost 4 games during the regular season and then won all the way through the 8A state championship. I think Joliet Catholic has that potential, especially in a field like this.
So we're looking at a possible semis of Hillcrest Joliet Catholic and Montini against Sterling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be my guess probably.
We've got 10 minutes left. Let's move on to 6A because 6A,
Yeah.
7A, 8A obviously are,
6A, I think, is one of the more interesting ones. Every single person I've seen has picked Cary Grove against Richards as the title game. And there's one big monster team that nobody's talking about.
And
Phillips. Remember all that preseason hype? Remember all those great athletes they have?
Yes.
I mean, and I saw Cary Grove. I don't see any way that Cary Grove is a favorite at all over Phillips, personally.
What do you think the biggest difference between those two teams are that could put one over the other? Cary Grove and
Phillips is bigger everywhere. And I think
More athletic.
Yeah, and I think they're really getting undersold. I mean, I'm not sure they were even mentioned on the big preview show the
If
other
I'm
night.
Phillips, this is exactly where I want to be.
Yeah.
They have had the spotlight on them for the last 3 years, probably. This is, I could not have asked for a better seed. I won't want to face Richards. That's my pick in this bracket. Richards, I think, is the best team in this entire class. Maybe even several other classes included. They have breezed through the season. They have athletes that are going to the Big Ten. They're just as talented as Phillips, and they wind up on the opposite side of the bracket too.
So Phillips, Richards, is that what?
I'm picking Phillips as the winner.
I would love to see a Phillips Richards state title game.
I would love to see a Phillips Richards state title game as well. I picked Richards as my team in this classification. All right, dark horse.
Dark horse, Notre Dame, depends on Ty Gavin's health.
Right, that's a
too.
huge factor.
But
I
we've
agree.
seen how good they can be with him. I think the best first round game, this was a tough one. As good of and as interesting as this bracket is, I didn't see a really great first round game. I went with Crystal Lake South at Kenwood.
I went with Prairie Ridge, Hinsdale South.
Yeah, that might be
I
all
think that's
right.
going to be a really good game.
I picked Crystal Lake South at Kenwood as well. I think that'll be an interesting game to watch.
The fact about this one, Von Steuben is in this bracket. They just started football 4 years ago, and they're in the
for them.
playoffs. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Don't think they're going to have much luck at Caneland, but just getting there after 4 years is pretty amazing.
I think another game to watch though in 6A is Crete Monee versus Bloomington. Did you guys?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Bloomington, which is why
I mean, Crete Monee challenged themselves the entire season. They played Lincoln Way East, I think, in week 1. Their record is 6-3, but again, they challenged themselves. So when you come into the playoffs and are a lower seeded team, you have to look at, how, again, they were challenged, and I think that'll be an interesting game to watch.
Crete Monee is always a good playoff team, as is Lamont, which is another one that I'd keep my eye on. They started off 0-2 on the season, and they have closed very well. To be honest, I saw the first 2 games, and I was like, Lamont is out of the picture this year. I think they're back in the picture, so I would also keep them in the conversation.
All right, 7A, what do we got?
Well, this is the most loaded bracket,
Yeah,
I think.
for sure.
Probably the most opinions. It seems like most people out there are going with East St. Louis in this one. But Batavia's there, who, that's Beth's pick. Mount Carmel, Nazareth.
Simeon?
Simeon. This one is completely loaded. But I think Beth's favorite is Batavia. Most people are going with East St. Louis. East St. Louis, I'm going to give the fact real quick. They've scored more than 70 points 3 times this year.
Wow.
They haven't lost to anybody in this state, and they went to Ohio and played Massillon. It's one of the most famous programs in the entire country, and they just lost 46-40. So they've definitely been tested. East St. Louis is a great program, but that would be a heck of a title game.
It would be a very fun title game. And if I'm East St. Louis, I highly doubt they've seen anything like Batavia's defense, so it could be a really, really fun game.
I think you can't count Simeon out of this conversation, though. I think if they can get past Nazareth and Batavia obviously are going to be huge challenges for them, but do we think that those are games they can't win?
I think they can win. I have Simeon as my biggest sleeper here. It's going to be an uphill battle. I think they got maybe the worst draw of anybody.
Exactly. They have to play maybe Lincoln Way West in the second round.
Which Lincoln Way West is also really good.
Yeah.
They were ranked the first part of the season, too, and I think that they could for sure make a run through the playoffs. Their draw was not ideal, and Simeon is really strong this year, so they might be able to come through and knock off a Nazareth and a Batavia.
And the dark horse has to be Mount Carmel, I would guess.
But like they have
I
on the
also
flip
like St. Charles
side.
North though.
On the flip side of Simeon, Mount Carmel, I was like picking the brackets and I was like, wait, how did we already get here? They have the easiest road like of the bracket, in my opinion, Mount Carmel.
Yeah,
Good
I mean,
job.
they'd wind up with East St. Louis in the quarters. That would be their,
That's the one real test.
yeah, their tough game. But no, before that, they should be all right. They're going to play a weird Friday afternoon, 4 p.m. playoff game against TF South at Gately, which is one of it is the strangest playoff time I've ever seen. Mount Carmel, 4 p.m. Friday at Gately. So
Interesting first round game. I have Wheaton, Warrenville South, Belleville
yeah,
East.
that's a
I
good
think
one.
That'll be a good one.
I've got Lake Zurich at DeKalb, but because
Should be a good one.
so much attention to Lake Zurich early. I heard they may have made a quarterback change, and things have been better there because their offense has just been not great all year. That defense has been great, and Lake Zurich is a 23 seed. So I think that should be a good one. My upset was St. Charles North. They're actually the 22 seed.
Right.
I think they should be able to beat Normal, who's an 11.
Definitely.
My best first round matchup, I have Maine West versus Bennett.
Ooh, that is a
It's
good
gonna be
one.
a really good game.
Definitely. I
That's
think
gonna be
that
evenly
might
matched.
be the best game of the first round, actually. Just how even, like you said, how evenly
Could be
matched
really,
those
really
two
evenly
teams are.
matched. I will say St. Charles North definitely could make a run. After seeing them this past weekend, I kept seeing Wheaton Warrenville South's play like results, and I was like, maybe their offense just isn't very good. But in fact, their offense was fine. It was just their defense was like that's how they win games. And St. Charles North was able to put more points up on them than any opponent has in the last few weeks. So I think they might be primed and ready to go too.
Bennett is another team. Going back to them briefly, 6-3 record, but they had three quality losses. Is that how we can say that? Notre Dame, Nazareth, and Marist. So that's a battle-tested team. So that's why I think that game's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about Batavia just because they keep leaving it until the end.
Right.
In all these wins. And eventually I feel like that might run out.
I think too from the game that I saw from them, Wheaton Warrenville South.
Yeah.
I know they ended up blowing it out in the second half with their running back. Remind me. Blanking on
Michael
his name
Janzi
right
had to
now.
come in because Art Taylor left with an injury, I believe. But then he's back now.
But yeah, I just think if you could prove that you could hang with them in the first half, then you could hang with them the whole game. It's just about putting together a full game.
So we could have
But to play devil's advocate, when is the last time that Batavia had anything on the line? Since week 6, when they
True.
qualified for the playoffs. Like this was their time to like figure it out and get ready for the playoffs. And now for everybody, it's do or die. And I think that might be exactly what Batavia needs to start really turning up the speed.
And it would be Batavia against either Simeon or Nazareth in the semis. That's pretty darn good. And then it would be East St. Louis or Mount Carmel against the bottom half of that one, who knows? Could be St. Charles North, Wheaton Warrenville South, Onondaga.
I see Simeon beating Nazareth. I really do. I think Simeon's a more veteran team. Nazareth has their young quarterback. I think Nazareth next year, the following year, as that young quarterback progresses, no problem. But I think Simeon's veteran status is going to help them get past Nazareth.
Well, we saw
Batavia,
Nazareth's
maybe.
line, what Marist did to it.
Right.
And so that's what I kept thinking about when I looked at that matchup.
Right.
If you're bigger than Nazareth, you can run up the gut on them, and that's all Marist.
And you saw what
tend to do.
Simeon's line did against Phillips.
We also have to remember that Simeon, like quite reasonably, could be playing in 8A, whereas Nazareth is bumped up a classification,
Yeah, so
and they really should be in 6A.
Yeah, that's
so
a really good point.
That's a conversation in itself. It's
Yeah.
not really like in terms of school numbers a fair matchup, to be honest.
And also, I think something you have to talk about when you talk about Simeon is just their mentality over there. I mean, I did that story on Alante Brown earlier in the season, and this is a team that has built to this moment. Their players are older, they're wiser, they're ready for this. So I think that's going to carry them through at least to the semifinals.
It's just a really like the draw. I mean, to
Yeah,
have to
it's
go
gonna
through
be
Nazareth
hard.
and to have to go through Batavia, like
Lincoln
one of
Way
them,
West.
Lincoln
Yeah.
Way West.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just that has to be the hardest path to the state title, no matter what classification.
But that's why I think it's their that what they have going on there, that team camaraderie over there, I think that's going to get them through.
Well,
honestly.
the most talented team they'll see is Nazareth, so we'll see what happens.
All right. The
8A?
big dog, 8A. Let's
Well,
talk
I'm
about it.
pretty sure that the favorite's Lincoln Way East.
I think that's fair.
Honestly, I don't know
But they're the
about
number
that.
2 seed because of the playoff points. I guess we should talk about that quickly because a lot of people are confused, especially on the website in the comments section. The IHSA does not sit down and give people their opinions or ask the coaches like they do in basketball and then put out their rankings. They just do it based on math. They take the team's record. And so there's all the 9-0 teams, and then they take the amount of wins your opponents have. So I'm not exactly right on the numbers here, but Brother Rice's opponents have 45 wins. Lincoln Way East's opponents have 44 wins. So that gives Brother Rice the number 1 seed. That's why Lincoln Way East is number 2. It is not because they're overvaluing the Catholic League Blue, which is what I have a lot of people on the website saying. That's not the case. It's just raw math. So that is why Brother Rice is number 1 and Lincoln Way East is number 2.
That's also why there was no question that Loyola was going to get in.
Yes.
Same exact thing.
They had so many.
They have the same slate as
Yeah.
Brother Rice virtually.
We see your questions also. I just want to mention we're going to get to them after we get through 8A. But what do we think about Lincoln Way East and Brother Rice? Will Brother Rice be able to challenge that?
See, that's why my dark horse is Maine South.
Okay.
Good dark horse.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy that you can
It's hard
pick.
to even call them a dark horse. That's why I can pick them as a dark
Yeah,
horse.
and so that, I feel like Brother Rice Marist is going to be what their biggest. HF was my other maybe dark horse. Brother Rice is going to have to beat one of those teams at least, HF or Marist. I don't know why I'm not sold on Brother Rice. I'm just not.
They're the most complete team I saw all year. I saw Lincoln Way East. They're more complete than Lincoln Way East, but Lincoln Way East has so much depth. Good Lord. I mean,
Yeah,
3
I
running
saw-
backs that can put
yeah.
up 250 yards a
And that was
pop.
it. I didn't think Brother Rice's running game was super great when I saw
But
it.
they don't have anything bad.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no weak link in Brother Rice, which I think is why they could challenge Lincoln
But
Way East.
how do we think their line could challenge Lincoln Way East? Because that's something that I don't know if their line could
Lincoln
really
Way-
challenge Lincoln Way East.
I will
running
tell
game.
you what, Lincoln Way East defensive line in particular has been their calling card in the last few years. They are good. They are not great like they have been. The Devin O'Rourke years. I mean, they've had Big Ten commits on their defensive line for years. They're good. Definitely the best that they've matched up with all year. But I don't think they're the best in the state. So we'll see. I mean, Lincoln Way East is a really good team, and so is Brother Rice. And I think that maybe if we're going to the out of 10 wins game, like Brother Rice might be able to take a couple. I don't think Lincoln Way East gets 10 out of 10 in that situation. And it just takes one to win the state title.
What do we think about most interesting first round game? I had Oak Park New Trier. I think those two teams are very
Yeah, that was my
matched.
second choice. I agree that should be a really good one. I had Loyola and Minooka just because it's weird and fun.
And Loyola, we've said this since the beginning, you can't count them out. How do we think they've developed as it? I mean,
They didn't end up doing that badly.
Right.
Like they had 3 losses on the season. That's not that bad.
Right.
Glenbard West has 2.
Right.
They should still absolutely be in the conversation. I had Loyola, Minooka, and then I also think Plainfield South, Naperville Central is going to be a good
for
game.
Sure.
Because
Definitely.
Naperville Central, when I asked coaches, hey, especially the Maine Souths of the world, you guys had a really tough slate. Is there anyone else that you think had the same sort of comparable schedule in the year? And they almost all said Naperville Central.
Well, if you look through Naperville Central's schedule, they had one of the toughest schedules in 8A, I would say.
I think they might have had the toughest schedule in the state.
And that's one of the interesting things. For those of you that aren't complete football nerds or anything, it's part of the problem is in both these games we're talking about, the Southwest Prairie plays a closed schedule. They don't play anyone outside of their conference. So it's very difficult for people like us to judge how good they are because it's a closed system. And so we're going to find out right away when we see Loyola against Minooka, Naperville Central against Plainfield South, if those Southwest Prairie teams are for real, because there's no other real way to tell. So we could be here next week and be like, wow, holy moly, these and then you start to reevaluate all the Southwest Prairie teams in the bracket because you finally have a data point, a piece of actual information you can use.
Matchup.
Yeah, that isn't in their weird closed little system, which is one of the bad things about high school football.
Any other possible first round upsets? I had Edwardsville over Evanston. They're coming off 5 straight wins. Evanston was good this year, definitely a really good team, but I just think Edwardsville has has the momentum going into that game.
And they have to come to Evanston. It's not going to be a fun drive.
Yeah, so actually that might be tough for them.
Such a long drive. Oh my goodness.
That might be.
Those 8A teams, basically all of 8A is up here in the Chicagoland area, except for the Metro East. Those are the east suburbs of St. Louis. So it's the Altons and the Belleville and that area. And so those teams are just really dealt a rough hand in all the sports because they have to make the drive up to the Chicago area for their playoff games, and it's too bad for them, and Edwardsville's caught in there.
Interesting point. Semifinals in 8A could be very, very, very fun to watch. Brother Rice could be back up against Marist. Lincoln Way East could be against Maine South. That'll be.
Yeah, that would be great. The Battle of Pulaski and see, that would be a tough one for me because I would kind of rather see Lincoln Way East, Maine South to cover it. Can't not cover Brother Rice Marist to go to state, so that'll be a big problem. We got a long ways before that.
What a problem for us to have.
There might be an upset.
The fact about 8A, when we talk about best schedules, and this kind of surprised me, Barrington, who you talked about earlier, they played 7 teams that made the playoffs this season. That is the most of anybody.
Well, and they beat Warren.
They're 6-3.
Beat
yeah.
Maine South. It's honestly, I think Barrington has to be in the conversation, as does Loyola, because they both had 3 losses. But when you look at those 3 losses and who they beat, they've got some potential.
And they're another one of those teams that's going to be testing the closed Southwest Prairie. They're at Oswego East in the first round, so we'll find out an awful lot about the Southwest Prairie.
Before we finish up, I just want to get to something that keeps popping up in our questions. What about Glenbard East? I forgot. We didn't bring them up. An undefeated team. What do we think about them in the playoffs? No comment?
Not a big fan. I've seen them twice, and they've really struggled to score.
Okay.
So, yeah,
I'm just as curious as you are. We have one more thing to do, though.
Oh, player of the week. She reminded me. Look at that. I almost forgot, guys. How could I forget?
I can't forget.
Yeah. Thank you, Beth, for reminding me. I almost just wrapped it up before we got to
I wasn't going to let that happen.
I have no idea who the candidates even are. So
well, you know what? I'm going to read them
news
to you.
Me.
I'm going to read them to you, then I'll get your opinion on it before I tell you who it is. So number 1, speaking of how Lincoln Way East has 3 running backs who can put up over 200 yards at the drop of a hat. Number 1 is Jordan Corbett from Lincoln Way East. He is number 3 on the depth chart, and after last week, number 1 on Lincoln Way East fans' hearts because he put up 200. It's a good one. This came out. Put up 217 yards rushing and 1 touchdown in a 31-0 win over Bolingbrook, who put up a good fight for the first half. Bolingbrook did. Brother Rice quarterback John Bean, he's week 2 now in the conversation for player of the week. He rushed for 3 touchdowns and passed for another touchdown in a 31-0 victory over Montini, shutout victory over Montini for the CCL Blue title. And then Richards wide receiver Walter Riley. He only had 2 touchdowns, but both, I saw his catches for these touchdowns described as like circus catch, and like he drug someone with him for 34 yards to get into the end zone. So like just put on an absolute show, as did a lot of the rest of Richards' team this past week. So of those 3, who's your player of the week?
Mine would have to be Bean. 4 touchdowns, right? 3 rushing, 1 passing. That kid is super talented. I mean, he's the key to that team's success. So seeing him have a week like that, their final week in a game like that, to try and finish out a perfect season, my pick is definitely with Bean.
Yeah, as much as I said I wasn't convinced about Brother Rice, and for some reason I am convinced about John Bean. He was definitely one of the top quarterbacks I saw this year, and if anything, that was my worry. He has to do way too much, in my opinion, for them. But yeah, he'd be my pick for player of the week. However, I would like to mention Zach Anderson of Peyton, who is probably the only guy all season who has, I think he caught a touchdown pass. He was getting crazy rushing yards up the middle against Kenwood, and then he kicked the game-winning extra point.
Yeah, he did a little bit Treadwell.
Yeah, with all of Gately just on his case and it was basically 6,000 Kenwood fans and 40 Hardy Peyton fans over there.
40. It was like...
Yeah, that was a pretty amazing performance by him, so Zach Anderson deserves a little credit.
Noted. Good job, Zach. Well, I will say, I think we just made history because we all 3 agree that John Bean is the player of the week. So John Bean, congratulations. You were very close when Taekwon Cox won it a few weeks ago, and I believe this is your week, week 9.
Congratulations,
John Bean, Brother Rice.
Bean. First player of the week that we've agreed on.
All 3 of us. I don't know what's going
Beth
on.
And I usually disagree.
Convinced us all. Convinced us all.
Good job, John Bean. That's going to do it for our playoff preview week. Make sure you tune in next week, same time, same place. we'll have a ton of news, obviously, from the first round of playoff action. So make sure you come back. We'll see you then.